The crack of my 6-year-old hitting the hardwood floor echoed through the living room. My sister screamed across the room, "Stupid! Worthless! No daddy!" My own mother looked down at her granddaughter and said, "Just like her mother, worthless." No one moved. Not one person in the family bent to help my shaking child. I didn't say a word. I crossed the room, picked Maddie up before her first tear fell, and walked out the front door in silence. My name is Shannon Doyle, 33. ICU nurse, the quiet daughter this family has always overlooked. 3 years ago, I emptied my settlement to save this house. They never knew my name is the only one on the deed. Now the house is headed to auction in weeks. Only my signature can stop it. Before I go any further, if this story is already sitting heavy in your chest, take a second to like and subscribe. It helps the algorithm carry it to the people who need it tonight. And tell me where you're listening from. Your city, your local time. I read every comment, and I like knowing who's out there in the quiet with me. I'm Shannon. This is the story of the night my family found out the quiet one had been paying attention the whole time. Let me take you back to where it really started. It started with a phone call I almost didn't pick up. It was a Tuesday, late after a double shift. I'd had a patient code on me that afternoon, a man 2 years younger than me. And we lost him. I was sitting in my car in the hospital parking lot, not driving anywhere, just listening to the engine tick. The phone lit up on the passenger seat. Bridget, my older sister. She never called unless she needed something, and she never needed something small. I picked up. "Shannon, oh, thank God." Her voice was warm in the particular way that always meant a knife was somewhere behind it. "We need you, honey. The house, Mom's house, it's in trouble, and you're the only one who can fix it." The Walsh family home, the house I grew up in, the house my mother still lived in, that my sister treated like her own personal estate, the house I had quietly saved from foreclosure 3 years before and had never once been thanked for. "What kind of trouble?" I asked. "There's a bank thing, a refinance. They need the owner's signature, that's all. Just a formality. You sign, the house is safe, everybody's happy. We'll handle every bit of it. You just have to sign." A pause, and then the password. "Family first, right?" "Family first." She said it the way some people say grace before they eat the thing they didn't cook. "There's a little get-together Saturday," she added, lighter now, like it had just occurred to her. "Nothing big. People want to help. You should come. Bring Maddie." I told her I'd think about it. I drove home with the windows down, even though it was cold, because I needed the air. You have to understand who Bridget is to understand any of this. In our town, my sister is a saint. She runs the spring food drive at the church. She sits on the library board. When the county paper does a local hearts feature, her picture is in it, holding somebody's casserole dish, smiling like the sun came up just for the photo. The devoted daughter who stayed home to care for Mom and the family house, while her ungrateful sister ran off to the city to play nurse and have her little drama. That's the version everyone in that town knows. Bridget, the heart of the family. And me? I'm the quiet one, the one who married a man the family decided wasn't good enough, the one who came home with a baby and no husband and, as my mother liked to put it, a situation. The one they tolerated at holidays and forgot the rest of the year. It had been like that my whole life. Bridget was the loud one, the bright one, the one whose tantrums got rewarded because they were easier to feed than to fight. I was the one who didn't make trouble. I learned early that being easy to overlook was the safest thing a girl could be in that house. So I got quiet. I got good at noticing things and saying nothing. 2 days after the phone call, I drove out to the house to pick up some of Maddie's things that had migrated there. A winter coat, a stuffed rabbit she couldn't sleep without. Maddie came with me. While I gathered her crayons off the living room floor, She wandered over to my mother's old roll-top desk in the corner and put her small hand flat on one of the drawers. "Mommy," she said, "why does Grandma keep the drawings in here?" I looked up. "What drawings, baby?" "The ones the man sends me. Grandma puts them in this drawer. She says they're not for me." She said it the way children say things they've already decided are normal, the way they report the weather. I felt something cold slide down through me. "What man, sweetheart?" She shrugged, the universal shrug of a kid losing interest. "The one who knows my daddy." I never got to ask another question. My mother came in from the kitchen, faster than a woman of 63 should move, and put herself between Maddie and the desk like she was guarding a border. "She makes things up," Mom said, smiling at me, not at Maddie. "You know how she is." I did not know how she is. I know exactly how my daughter is. She is 6, and she is the most honest person in any room she walks into. She doesn't invent men who knew her father. She doesn't have anyone to invent them from. But I was tired, and the floor was covered in crayons, and the habit of a lifetime is hard to break. So I let it go. I told myself it was nothing. That was my first mistake. I have always let it go. If you had been standing in that room, watching a grandmother step between a small child and a locked drawer, what would you have thought was inside it? Hold on to that picture. I'm going to need you to remember it later. To understand the drawer, you have to understand the 4 years that came before it. And to understand those, you have to understand Sean. I met Sean Doyle when I was 25. He was a lineman for the power company, the kind of man who climbed poles in ice storms in the middle of the night so other people could keep their heat on. He had a laugh you could hear across a parking lot and hands that were always a little scuffed up, and the first time he met my mother, he called her ma'am and held the door, and she still managed to make him feel 2 inches tall by the end of dinner. My family did not approve. "Too blue collar," my mother said. "No name, no money, no future." Bridget took to calling him the electrician, with a little curl of the lip, even though that's not what he did. Because getting it slightly wrong was her way of telling you a person didn't matter enough to get right. I married him anyway. It was the first thing in my life I had ever chosen purely for myself, and I have never once regretted it. Maddie was born in the spring of 2019. Sean used to carry her up and down the hallway at 2 a.m. against his chest so I could sleep before a shift. He kept a list in his phone, I found it later, titled Things to Teach Mads. How to change a tire, how to fish, how to know when somebody's lying to you. He never got to teach her any of them. In the spring of 2021, a commercial truck blew a red light on Route 9 and hit Sean's car on the driver's side. He died before the ambulance arrived. Maddie was 2 years old. She doesn't remember him. She knows her father the way you know a story someone tells you, secondhand, in pieces, with all the parts you most want left out. I don't talk about that year much. The more something hurts, the less I tend to say about it. That's just how I'm built. I went back to work 11 days after the funeral because the silence in the apartment was worse than the ICU, and at least at the hospital, my hands knew what to do. There was a wrongful death case against the trucking company. It dragged on for the better part of a year. In 2022, it finally settled, $380,000, after the attorneys took their share. The lawyer who handled it was a soft-spoken man named Tom Reardon, and when we signed the final papers, he said something I only half heard at the time because grief makes you deaf to good advice. "Don't sign anything you haven't read, Shannon," he told me. "Not even from family, especially not from family." He insisted on setting aside $60,000 of the settlement in a custodial account for Maddie, money locked away for her, untouchable until she turned 18. Her father's last gift, turned into a future. The rest was mine to figure out, and that is the exact week my mother's house went into foreclosure. She had taken out a reverse mortgage years before, the kind that eats a house from the inside, and she had let it go bad. $310,000 to clear it or lose the place at auction. My mother sat at the kitchen table and cried into a dish towel. Bridget held her hand and looked straight at me across the table. "You're the only one who has anything, Shannon," she said. "You can't let Mom be put out on the street. Not after everything she's done for you. What had she done for me, exactly? I never asked. You don't, in a family like mine. So I did it. I emptied the settlement. I took the money that came from my husband's death, the worst day of my life, turned into a number on a check, and I poured it into the foundation of my mother's house. Tom Reardon told me that since I was the one paying, and the bank required a clear owner, the deed should go into my name. I almost said no. Give it to Mom. Give it to Bridget. I don't care. I just want this conversation to be over. But Tom's voice was in my ear. "Don't sign anything you haven't read." So the deed went into my name, mine alone. My mother's reaction, when she found out, was to frown. "Well, it really should be Bridget's," she said. "She's the one who lives here and keeps it up." And just like that, the thing I had bankrupted myself to save became, in their telling, a debt I owed them. I went back to the city. I went back to the unit. I buried myself in 12-hour shifts, in monitors and charts and other people's emergencies, because in the ICU, nobody cares whose name is on what deed. They only care whether you can read a body that's quietly trying to tell you it's dying. And I am very good at that. I read the numbers. I catch the one value that's drifted out of range while everything else still looks fine. I notice the rhythm that doesn't match the chart, the small wrong thing nobody else has clocked yet. It is the one thing I've always been good at. My family simply never believed it counted for anything, because it was quiet and they only respected the loud. For 4 years, I told my daughter her father had loved her more than anything in the world. And I told myself the house was paid for, and the worst part of my life was behind me. I believed both of those things completely. That was my second mistake. The Saturday get-together turned out to land on one of Maddie's hard days. We walked into the house to find a dozen relatives already there. Aunts, cousins, a couple of my mother's church friends, balloons taped to the doorframe in no particular color scheme, a folding table of food. Bridget moved through it all like a hostess at her own event, touching elbows, refilling cups. I should have read the room right then. It wasn't a get-together, it was a stage, and Maddie and I had walked into the middle of someone else's performance without a script. Maddie was overtired and overstimulated, the way 6-year-olds get when there are too many strangers patting their heads. 20 minutes in, she knocked over a glass of grape juice onto the good rug by the sofa. It was an accident. It is the kind of thing that happens to every child who has ever existed. Bridget crossed the room in 3 quick steps. She bent down low, right into my daughter's face, close enough that Maddie leaned back from her. And the warm hostess voice was gone, replaced by something flat and vicious. "Stupid, worthless, no daddy." Each word was its own sentence. Maddie flinched backward, and her heel caught the edge of the rug, and she went down hard onto the bare hardwood beyond it. The crack of it silenced the entire room. And in that silence, my mother, looked down at her own granddaughter, lying on the floor, and her face curled with something I can only call disgust. And she said, just like her mother, worthless. I have replayed the next 4 seconds more times than I can count. The thing I remember most clearly is not the cruelty, it's the stillness. A dozen grown adults in that room, and not one of them moved an inch toward my child on the floor. They looked at her, and they looked at Bridget, and they waited to see what was allowed. So I moved. I crossed the room. I bent down and I picked Maddie up before the first tear had even fallen, settled her against my chest the exact way her father used to walk her down the hall, and I turned around and I carried her out the front door. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't slam anything. I just left. In the car, Maddie was silent for a long time. The streetlights went by. Then, in the dark of the back seat, she asked me the question I'd been dreading for 4 straight years. "Mommy, did I do something wrong? Is that why my daddy never came?" I had to pull the car over to the shoulder. I gripped the wheel and stared straight ahead through the windshield so she couldn't see what was happening to my face. "No, baby," I said when I could trust my voice. "You never once did anything wrong. Not ever. I promise you that." She seemed to accept it, the way kids do, and within a mile, she was asleep. But I drove the rest of the way home with my jaw set, because something in me had finally quietly turned over. When we got home, I put her to bed, and then I sat down at my kitchen table with the folder Bridget had pushed into my hands on the way out the door, like nothing in the world had happened. "Just sign these Monday," she'd said, breezy. "We'll fix everything. The refinance papers. The thing they needed me for." I'm a nurse. When something in front of me doesn't look right, I do not look away from it. I read. The top sheet was a refinance application against the house. My house. Standard enough, but stapled behind it was a second document, and the second document stopped my breath. A home equity line of credit. Opened against the house 3 years earlier. Drawn down, the statement said, to $180,000, with my signature at the bottom. I have never in my life taken a loan against that house. I have never seen that document. I never signed it. I sat there a long time under the kitchen light, looking at a signature that was mine and was not mine. The S was wrong. I looped the top of my S. I've signed it the same way since I was 9 years old. The S on that loan was a plain, lazy line. Somebody who had seen my signature but never watched my hand make it had drawn that. What do you think I found when I finally opened that locked drawer? Don't answer yet. Hold your guess, because I promise you, at this point in the story, you are only about halfway there. I went back to the house on a weekday morning when I knew my mother would be at her standing hair appointment and Bridget would be at the church running her food drive. I let myself in with the key I'd never given back. The house was quiet in a way it never was when they were in it. I went straight to the roll-top desk in the corner of the living room. The drawer was locked, just like Maddie had said. I found the key in the same place my mother had hidden it for 30 years, taped to the underside of the desk lip, exactly where she used to hide it from us when we were children sneaking after Christmas presents. Some things never change. I almost laughed. I didn't. Inside the drawer was a stack of envelopes held together with a rubber band. Dozens of them. Everyone addressed in the same careful, blocky handwriting to Madeline Doyle. Every single one of them unopened. The postmark stretched back almost 4 years. 2, sometimes 3 a year, clustered around birthdays and Christmases. And the return address was a name I knew, but had not heard spoken aloud in years. Liam Doyle, Sean's older brother, Maddie's uncle. After Sean died, the entire Doyle family had simply evaporated from our lives. My mother had told me, gently, that they wanted nothing to do with us, that they blamed me, somehow, for the accident, and that it was kinder to everyone to just let them drift away. I had been too far underwater in my own grief to question any of it. You believe the people who are supposed to love you. That's the whole trick of it. I peeled the rubber band off and opened the oldest envelope. My hands were not steady. Inside was a child's birthday card and a folded drawing. The drawing was a stick figure of a tall man and a small girl holding hands beneath a big yellow sun, and in that same blocky handwriting, the card read, "Happy birthday, little bear. Your Uncle Liam loves you, and your daddy loved you more than anything in this whole world. He talked about you every single day. 4 years of those, trapped in a drawer. Hidden from a child who had been raised to believe her father was a man not worth a single word. There was one more thing at the bottom of the stack. A thicker envelope, this one addressed to me, also never opened. A letter from Liam, dated almost 3 years back. I read it standing up, and then I read it again sitting on my mother's floor. He had tried to reach me a dozen times, he wrote. Phone calls that went unreturned, a visit where my mother met him at the door and told him I needed space. He wrote that he wasn't trying to take anything, that he only wanted to make sure Maddie was okay, and that the money set aside for her stayed safe, in case anyone ever tried to touch it. He wrote that Sean had a small life insurance policy through the Linemen's Union, and that before he died, somehow knowing nothing and everything the way people do, Sean had made Liam promise that whatever happened, that money would go to his daughter and to no one else. Tell her I tried, the letter ended. Tell her when she's ready. I sat on my mother's hardwood floor, and I did not cry, because the more it hurts, the quieter I get. But sitting there, I understood with total clarity that the story I had been told about my own life, about who left, who blamed, who didn't want us, was a lie that someone had built on purpose, board by board, over 4 years. And then I understood something worse. If Bridget had forged my name onto a loan against my house, and my mother had been hiding a dead man's letters about his daughter's money, then no, Daddy, screamed into the face of a 6-year-old, wasn't an insult. It was a confession. That same afternoon, sitting in my car outside the house, I dialed the number printed at the bottom of Liam's 3-year-old letter. I had no idea if it still belonged to anyone. A man answered on the second ring. When I said my name, "This is Shannon, Sean's wife." He went so silent I thought the line had dropped. Then, when he spoke, his voice had gone rough. "Shannon, my God, is she okay? Is Maddie okay? Not where have you been, not why did you cut us off, not how could you. Just, is the child okay?" I had braced for anger, and what I got was a man whose first and only instinct was the same as mine. It undid me a little. We talked for almost 2 hours, parked at the curb of the house that had eaten my husband's death. He told me what had happened after the funeral, how the Walsh side had quietly frozen the Doyles out, how my mother had answered the door the one time he drove up unannounced and informed him with a pleasant smile that Maddie didn't need that side of the family confusing her about things. How every card came back as nothing, no acknowledgement, until he started to wonder if I even knew they existed. "I didn't," I said. "I never saw a single one." He was quiet. Then he told me the part that turned my hands to ice on the steering wheel. Shannon, Sean's policy, the $60,000. I helped that lawyer, Reardon, set up the account for Maddie. His voice was careful, the way you're careful around something sharp. It was supposed to be locked down until she turns 18. About 2 years ago, I got a notice in the mail. The account address had been changed. I called the bank. They wouldn't tell me anything because I'm not the custodian on it. You are. A pause. Have you been getting the statements, Shannon? I had never received a single statement on that account. Not one. In 3 years. Liam, I said slowly. I think someone has been opening my mail. He let out a long breath. Then you need to find out what's left in that account before they get you to sign anything. Because a person who'd reach into a dead man's money for his own kid? He stopped, started again. That kind of person doesn't have a floor, Shannon. There's no bottom to it. I want to be honest about something, because I think some of you have lived it. Up to that phone call, a part of me still wanted there to be an explanation, a misunderstanding, a version of the story where my mother and my sister were difficult, cold, selfish, but not criminal, not monsters, People who grow up overlooked spend their entire lives manufacturing excuses for the people who overlooked them. It's the only way to keep loving someone who keeps proving they don't deserve it. You become an expert at it. You could win medals. That phone call took the medals away. If you grew up being the one who made excuses for the people who hurt you, the one who kept the peace, who let it go, who told yourself it wasn't that bad, drop a comment and tell me. I'm not asking to be dramatic. I'm asking because I think there are more of us out here than anyone admits, and I'd like to know I'm not driving home alone. I started doing the only thing I've ever really known how to do. I started reading. I am not a forensic accountant. I'm an ICU nurse, but the skill is the same one, pointed at a different kind of body. You take a system that everyone insists is healthy, that everyone has stopped looking at because it's always been fine, and you hunt for the single number that doesn't belong, the value that's drifted, the slightly off rhythm under all the normal-looking ones. I called Tom Reardon. He remembered me the second I said my name, and when I told him what I'd found in my own refinance folder, his voice changed completely. "Come into the office," he said. "Bring all of it, every page. And Shannon, do not tell your mother or your sister that you've spoken to me. Not a word." In his conference room, we spread it across the table like an autopsy. The home equity line first. $180,000 opened against my house 3 years ago. My forged signature at the bottom. Tom pulled the recording details from the county. Every lien against a property is public record if you know to look, and nobody in my family had ever imagined I would look. The loan had been notarized by a woman named Donna Brandt. The name meant nothing to me at first. Tom made 2 calls, and it meant something fast. Donna Brandt worked the member services desk at the credit union where Bridget had banked for 15 years. The notary log, also public, recorded my signature being witnessed and stamped on a Tuesday in March, 3 years back. I went home that night and pulled my own work records. That Tuesday in March, I had worked a 12-hour shift. I had badge swipes time-stamped at the unit doors. I had hourly nursing notes in a patient's chart, every one of them signed with my login, every one of them 100 miles away from that credit union. While someone in my hometown was signing my name to a loan, I was standing over a ventilator, keeping a stranger breathing. I brought all of it back to Tom the next morning. He laid the badge log next to the notary log and looked at the 2 dates lining up. And he sat back in his chair. "This isn't a mistake," he said quietly. "A mistake is one wrong number. This is a system. Somebody has been running this for years, and they've been running it because they were certain you'd never check." Then he pulled the custodial account. Maddie's account. Her father's last $60,000. He turned the monitor toward me. Opening deposit, 2022. $60,000. Current balance, $21,800. $38,000. Gone. Withdrawn in pieces over 2 years. Never huge amounts. Never enough to trip an alarm, just steady. And every single withdrawal authorized by a signature on a form. Mine. The same wrong. Lazy S. I have stood over a child whose heart had stopped and run a code with my voice level and my hands steady. Because that is the job, and the job does not care how you feel. I kept my hands steady in that conference room too, looking at the proof that my sister had reached into my dead husband's final gift to his daughter and lifted it out, $38,000 at a time, signing my name with every reach. "There's always more," Tom said gently, watching my face. "With these, there's always more. The question is where the money went. Money like this doesn't just disappear. It goes somewhere. And wherever it went is usually the part they're most afraid of." That was the thread I pulled next. And it led somewhere I never would have guessed on my own. Tom and I traced the withdrawals out of Maddie's account to where they landed. Not Bridget's personal checking. Not her savings. A non-profit account. I read the name off the screen twice before it registered. The Walsh Family Memorial Fund. A few years back, Bridget had set up a small charitable fund in our late father's memory. He died of a heart attack when I was a teenager. The fund collected donations at church suppers, at the fall festival, at the very food drive she'd been running the morning I let myself into the house. Everyone in town had dropped a folded 20 into that jar at some point. It was, I realized, a load-bearing wall of the whole legend of St. Bridget. The selfless daughter, honoring her father, gathering the community's small kindnesses for good works. Maddie's stolen money had flowed into it. And the money flowing out of it did not go to good works. Tom walked the statements with me, line by patient line. It went to the mortgage on Bridget's own separate house, across town. It went to a car lease. It went to a credit card, paid down every month like clockwork. The Memorial Fund wasn't a charity. It was a laundromat, and my daughter's inheritance had been run through the wash right alongside every well-meaning $20 bill in that town. The woman who had screamed, "worthless" and "no daddy" into a child's face had been quietly living on that child's dead father's money for 2 years. And calling it charity, and letting the whole town thank her for it. I sat with that in the conference room for a long minute. Tom didn't rush me. Then I asked him the only question that mattered. What does this mean about where I actually stand? He told me to hold on. He said I wasn't ready to hear it yet, that I was still thinking about all of it the wrong way. He was right. But first, before any of that, I needed to do one thing that had nothing to do with paper. I needed to take my daughter to meet her uncle. I drove 2 hours the next Saturday with Maddie in the back seat, not entirely sure what I was driving toward. Liam Doyle was waiting in the parking lot of a diner off the highway. He was a big man, broad through the shoulders like Sean had been, and when he saw Maddie climb down out of the car, he didn't rush her. He went down onto one knee on the asphalt, slow, to get himself to her eye level, and then he just waited there for her to decide. "You probably don't remember me," he said, "but I knew you when you were about this big." He held his scuffed hands a foot apart. "Your dad called me the same night you were born. 2 a.m. He said you already had his exact grumpy frown." Maddie studied him with her father's serious dark eyes. Then she asked him, point blank, the thing she had been carrying for 4 years. Did my daddy really love me, or did he leave because I was bad? Liam's voice did not waver, though I saw his jaw work. "Every single day, little bear, and he didn't leave you. He never would have. Something happened to him that wasn't anybody's fault, and was for sure not yours." He paused. "I can prove he loved you, if you want." I brought proof. He'd brought a shoebox, worn soft at the corners. Inside were photographs. Sean in a hospital gown, holding a newborn Maddie like she was made of glass. Sean asleep flat on a couch with a baby starfished on his chest, both of them dead to the world. Sean on a riverbank, holding a fishing rod, grinning into the camera. And folded under the photos, a sheet of paper in Sean's own handwriting, titled at the top, "Things to Teach Mads. How to change a tire, how to fish, how to know when somebody's lying to you." I had to look away at that one. Underneath the photographs were copies. Liam had kept copies of everything. The original custodial account paperwork, with the real terms typed out plain. The union insurance documents naming Maddie. A handwritten log, in his blocky print, of every time he had tried to reach us. Every call, every card, every drive. And how each one had died at my mother's front door. "I kept it all," he said, like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. Sean asked me to look out for her. I couldn't figure out how to do that, since nobody would let me near her, so I just kept everything in a box, in case the day ever came when somebody finally asked. Maddie spent that whole afternoon with her uncle. He taught her to skip a flat rock on the diner's drainage pond, and she was terrible at it, and she laughed in a way I had not heard come out of her in a long, long time. A loud, unguarded laugh, her father's laugh, the kind you can hear across a parking lot. On the drive home, she fell asleep in her car seat, clutching the stick figure drawing of the tall man and the little girl under the yellow sun. I looked at her in the rearview mirror, and then I looked at the dark road ahead, and I thought about the auction 3 weeks out and the pen they wanted to put in my hand. They thought I was driving back home to surrender. They had no idea what was riding in the back seat. The Monday after, Tom Reardon called me into his office and shut the door, and he finally told me the thing he'd made me wait for. "I need you to understand your actual position," he said, "because you have been thinking about this whole thing exactly the way they want you to think about it. Like, you're the one who needs rescuing. You're not. You haven't been for a long time." He laid it out for me in plain language, the way you'd explain a diagnosis. The house was mine. Solely, cleanly mine. No one else's name had ever touched that deed. The home equity line they'd run against it was forged, and a forged lien is voidable. I did not owe that $180,000. I had never agreed to it. The refinance papers they were so desperate to slide under my pen would do exactly one thing. They would take a fraudulent loan and make it real. They would convert a forgery into a legitimate debt, signed this time with my genuine looping S, and lay $180,000 of my sister's theft squarely onto my back. The forged loan would dissolve into a clean one, with my real name on it. The bank's dispute would die, for lack of anyone claiming the signature was fake, and the only person left owing a dime would be me. "They don't need your signature to save the house," Tom said. "They need your signature to bury the evidence. Right now, your name is the only thing standing between your sister and a forgery charge. The minute you sign that refinance, the dispute dies, the lender stops asking questions, and you're the one holding the bag." He folded his hands on the desk. "You are not the supplicant in this story, Shannon. You are the only person at this table holding anything at all. They just spent years making very sure you'd never look down and notice what was in your hand." I sat very still in that chair. For 4 years, I had been the quiet daughter, the overlooked one, the one who owed. And in a single sentence, the entire thing had flipped over like a body on a table, and there was the truth that had been there the whole time, hidden under the part everyone was looking at. The exact quality they had always despised in me, that I read everything, that I noticed, that I would not sign a page I hadn't gone through line by line, was the one thing in the world that could end them. I did not feel triumphant. I want to be clear about that, for anyone expecting that this is the part where I tell you I felt powerful. I didn't. I felt cold and steady and very, very clear. The way I feel at 3 a.m. when a patient is crashing and everybody else in the room is starting to panic. That clarity isn't a good feeling. It's just the one you need. I think Bridget felt the temperature in the family change, the way animals feel a storm before the sky does. Because 3 days before her big event, she struck first. A letter arrived at my apartment on the letterhead of a family law attorney downtown. My mother and my sister were petitioning the court for grandparent and aunt visitation rights, and the letter went further than that. It raised serious concerns about the stability of Madeline's home environment, concerns about a single mother who deliberately isolates the child from her loving extended family, who is frequently absent from the home due to overnight nursing shifts, who is emotionally unpredictable since the death of the child's father. There was a second sheet behind it, a copy of a report that had been filed with Child Protective Services. Anonymous, built out of the exact same sentences. If you have ever wondered what a real threat looks like when it puts on a suit and uses polite words, that is what it looks like. Bridget made the message explicit when she called that night, the warm hostess voice back in place like it had never left. "We just want what's best for Maddie," she said. "That's all this has ever been about. Family. Now, you come to the event Saturday, you sign the papers in front of everyone, you show this family you're part of it, and all of this other unpleasantness just goes away. Nobody wants a custody fight." Think about what that would do to that poor little girl, dragged through court. Think about her. She believed she had finally found the one pressure point I had no defense against. My daughter, what she had actually done was hand me the last piece of evidence I needed. A documented, dated attempt to use the family court and a false report to a child protection agency as leverage to extract my signature. Coercion, in writing, on letterhead. Tom called it, when I showed him, a beautiful self-inflicted wound. I didn't have a clever name for it. I just knew it was the thing that took the last of my hesitation away. There was one piece left to collect, not on paper. I needed a voice. I went to see Bridget alone, 2 days before the event. I left Maddie with a sitter and drove out to her house. Her own house, the one paid down with our father's memorial fund, and I played the part she was expecting. The tired, beaten, overwhelmed little sister, finally worn all the way down. I told her she was probably right. I told her I'd most likely sign. I just had a few questions first, before Saturday, so I'd understand what I was putting my name to. I let her believe she had won. People who think they've won tell you everything. That's the one thing bullies and patients have in common. Relief loosens the tongue. In Ohio, only one person in a conversation needs to consent for it to be legally recorded. I was that one person. The recorder was running in my coat pocket from the moment she opened the door. We sat at her kitchen table. She made tea. She was expansive, generous, magnanimous in victory, the way she always got when she was sure she had the upper hand. "I really don't understand," I said, keeping my voice small and uncertain. "Why you took it out of Maddie's account? That was Sean's money, for her." Bridget actually laughed. She picked up her mug and swirled the tea around in it, slow, the little performance of relaxation she's done my whole life. "Oh, Shannon, that money was just sitting there doing nothing. Sean's gone. He doesn't need it, does he? And honestly..." She leaned in over the table, lowering her voice like she was telling me a kindness. "A kid like that? No father. Dragged around to night shifts. Growing up in an apartment. She's not going to amount to much anyway. It's not really an investment. It does more good in the family, with people who actually contribute something. And the loan against the house?" She waved a hand. "It's my house too, as far as I'm concerned. I'm the one who lives near it, takes care of Mom, keeps everything running. You write one check 3 years ago, and you think you own all of us forever?" Her chin came up. Somebody had to make that property actually work, so I did what I had to do. It's basically my company to run. She shrugged, satisfied. I decide who deserves what. The recorder caught every syllable. I drove home with it in my pocket, both hands on the wheel, and I did not feel like crying. I had it all now. The forged loan, the notary whose log put my hand in a room 100 miles from where I stood, the drained account, the laundering through a fund the whole town had blessed, the coercion in writing, and now her own voice, calm and warm over a cup of tea, explaining exactly why a 6-year-old wasn't worth her dead father's money. 4 layers of proof, no floor under any of it, just like Liam said. All that was left was the stage, and my sister, God help her, had spent 3 weeks building it for me with her own 2 hands. She called the event Save the Walsh Family Home. She had been promoting it for weeks. Flyers at the church, a post in the town's community group, a mention in the county paper. She'd booked the church fellowship hall. By the time Maddie and I arrived, there were close to 200 people inside. Neighbors, parishioners, the woman from the library board, a young reporter from the county paper with a phone already out, donation jars on every folding table, a banner with our family name printed across it in script, and a slideshow looping on a screen at the front of the room. Warm photographs of the house, of my mother on the porch, of better days. The story Bridget had sold them all was simple, and I have to give her this. It was brilliant. The devoted daughter fighting with everything she had to save the family's beloved home from the cold hands of the bank, betrayed by her selfish, big-city sister, the nurse, who couldn't be bothered to help. People had brought casserole dishes. People had written checks and folded them into the jars. The room was full of genuine, decent kindness, all of it pointed in exactly the wrong direction. Tom had told me how it would go. "She won't be able to help herself," he'd said. "She'll want the whole room to watch you sign. She'll want witnesses to your surrender. So let her bring you up there. Let her hand you the pen, and then you decide what the room sees." I walked in with Maddie's hand in mine, and Liam Doyle a step behind my shoulder. The room noticed. A small ripple of quiet moved across it, the way a room shifts when something it wasn't expecting comes through the door. Bridget's eyes found me, and for half a second, something flickered behind them. Calculation, maybe, or the first thin thread of doubt. Then the saint's smile clicked back into place, like a light switch. She took the microphone at the front of the hall. She thanked everyone for coming. She talked about family and sacrifice and the values our late father had raised his 2 girls to honor. She was good, her voice caught in all the right places. People nodded, the reporter typed. And then she turned, and she found me in the crowd, and her voice filled with a warm, trembling, beautifully performed emotion. "And I want to thank my sister, Shannon, who's come home tonight at last to do the right thing. Shannon, honey, would you come up here? Would you come and sign the papers, right here, in front of everyone who loves this family, so that together, all of us, we can finally save our home?" There was a small table at the front of the room. The refinance papers were squared neatly on it. A pen lay across the top page. 200 faces turned toward me, every one of them warm and expectant, and certain they knew exactly how this story was going to end. The reporter lifted her phone and started recording. I walked up to the front of the hall. The room was very quiet. I picked up the pen, and I set it back down on the table. "I'm not going to sign this," I said. My voice was level. The unit teaches you that. The worse it gets, the quieter you go, because panic is contagious and calm is too, and the calm one runs the room. "But since all of you came out tonight to learn the truth about this family," I said, "I think you should actually get to hear it." Bridget's smile held, but her hand tightened on the microphone. "Shannon, this really isn't the time, or the 3 years ago," I said, turning to the room, not to her. "This house went into foreclosure. I paid it off, $310,000, with the settlement from my husband's death, Maddie's father. I let that land. The deed is in my name, only my name. My sister did not save this home." I gestured at the smiling photograph still cycling on the screen behind me. "For the last 3 years, she's been stealing from it." A murmur went through the hall, low and uncertain. People glanced at each other. Bridget lunged for the narrative. "She's not well, everyone. You can all see she's not well. The stress of being a single mother, it's—" I looked over at Liam. He stepped to the laptop wired into the projector and tapped a key. The warm slideshow of the house vanished off the screen. In its place, 12 feet tall at the front of a church hall, was the forged home equity line. $180,000, my name at the bottom, with the plain, lazy S that has never once come off my hand. "I never signed that," I said into the quiet. On the day that loan was notarized, I was at work, 100 miles from here, on a hospital unit, with badge records that timestamp me at the door every hour and patient charts with my name on them all day long. The notary log says I was standing in a credit union here in town. I wasn't. Somebody signed my name. The hall had gone dead still. Bridget's voice climbed a register. This is insane. You can't just put... Turn that off? Liam tapped the key again. The custodial account filled the screen. Maddie's account. This is the money my husband left for his daughter, I said. $60,000 from his union policy, locked away until she turns 18. $38,000 of it is gone, pulled out over 2 years, a little at a time, each withdrawal signed, I paused, with my name again, the same forged signature. I looked out at the donation jars on the folding tables, and every dollar of it went into the Walsh Family Memorial Fund, the same fund some of you put money into tonight, and out of that fund, it paid my sister's mortgage, her car, her credit card. The woman from the library board slowly, deliberately, set down the checkbook in her lap. Bridget's hands were shaking now, both of them. The mask was coming apart in front of the exact people whose belief had held it on her face for 15 years. "You ungrateful little..." she started, and then heard herself, and stopped. Too late. The whole front of the room had heard the snarl come up out of the saint. "You want to know what she really thinks," I said quietly, "of the little girl this whole town turned out for tonight? She told me herself, 2 days ago, at her kitchen table." I took the recorder out of my coat pocket. I held it up to the microphone. And my sister's voice came out of the church speakers and filled the hall. Tinny, clear, warm, and utterly unmistakable. "A kid like that? No father. She's not going to amount to much anyway. It does more good in the family with people who actually contribute. It's basically my company to run. I decide who deserves what." The silence that came down after the recording stopped was the loudest thing I have ever heard in my life. 200 people, and not one sound. I had stood in rooms when a heart monitor went flat, and even those rooms had more noise in them than that church hall had in the 3 seconds after my sister's own voice finished speaking. If this story has reached you tonight, if you have ever been the quiet one, the overlooked one, in a family that mistook your silence for weakness and your patience for permission, stay with me for the last part, because what happens after the truth comes out is the only piece of any of this that you actually get to keep. Bridget lost the last of her control in front of 200 people. She screamed that I had manipulated her, that the recording was illegal, that I'd tricked her, that I had always been jealous of her, that I was destroying the family out of spite. The reporter was filming openly now, and every word my sister threw at me only filled in the portrait I'd just painted. The saint was gone. What was left was the woman who had bent down into a child's face. My mother had been sitting in the front row the whole time, in her good coat, her purse in her lap. When the recording played, she did not gasp and she did not weep. She simply stood up, smoothed the front of her coat, and walked out the side door of the hall without a single word to anyone. Not to Bridget, not to me, not to the room. She has never been able to be in a room where the story has stopped going her way. She just leaves it. A man near the back of the hall stood up. He introduced himself, quietly, as a fraud investigator from the bank that held the forged home equity line. Tom had made one phone call the day before. That's all it takes, sometimes, one person who knows which call to make. And the bank had sent someone to sit in the back and listen. He said, in the flat, careful way those people speak, that the bank would be opening a formal investigation into the origination of that loan, and that no foreclosure sale of the property would move forward while an active forgery claim was on the file. The auction was dead. Just like that. 3 weeks of dread, gone in one sentence from a stranger in a folding chair. The notary, Donna Brandt, was not in the room, but her name had been 12 feet tall on the screen, and at least 3 different people in that hall had photographed it before Liam shut the projector off. Through all of it, Maddie stood beside her uncle with his big hand resting on her shoulder. I had been afraid of what watching this would do to her, afraid I'd made the wrong call bringing her. But she just watched her aunt come apart, and then she looked up at me, and in her clear little voice that carried much farther across the quiet hall than she could have known, she asked, "Mommy, is that the lady who took my daddy's money?" The whole front of the room heard her. I knelt down to her level, the way Liam had knelt in the parking lot. "Yes, baby," I said. "That's her, but she doesn't get to keep it." The pen was still lying on the small table at the front of the hall, exactly where I'd set it down. Untouched. In the end, nobody signed anything that night. I'll tell you what happened in the time that followed, because the truth doesn't stop being true once the room goes home. By the end of that first week, the library board had voted Bridget off it. In a quiet phone vote nobody bothered to soften, and the church had publicly suspended the Walsh Family Memorial Fund and asked anyone who donated to come forward. The county paper ran the reporter's footage. In a town that small, a saint doesn't fall slowly. She falls all at once, in front of everyone, and the casserole dishes do not come back. The forged loan was voided. The bank's investigation confirmed in a matter of weeks what my badge records had already proven, that I was not, and could not have been, in that credit union the day my name was witnessed onto a loan. The notary's commission was revoked, and the whole matter was referred to the county prosecutor's office, along with everything else Tom and I had pulled together. These things move slowly. Criminal cases are not television. They take their own long, grinding time, and I've made my peace with that. The file is still working its way through the system as I tell you this. I let it. I assembled the truth. I am not the one who gets to bring down the hammer, and I don't want to be. I built the case. I handed it to the people whose job it is to swing it. There is a kind of justice that means more precisely because it isn't yours to deliver. Tom helped me recover what was left of Maddie's account, and the memorial fund was frozen as part of the investigation, which means the $38,000 is coming back where it belongs. I had the custodial account closed and a new one opened, one that only I, and one day Liam, can ever touch. It reads, Madeline Doyle. It was always supposed to read Madeline Doyle. The house is still mine. I'm selling it, not out of spite, because a house bought with my husband's death and rotted from the inside by my sister's greed is not a home, and I will not raise my daughter inside those walls. The money will finally go where it should have gone in the very beginning. To Maddie, to her future, to the 18-year-old she is going to grow into, who is going to have choices in this world, because her father loved her enough to leave her something, and because her mother loved her enough to make absolutely sure that nobody got to take it from her. My mother has called 11 times. I have not answered once. There is no message I need from a woman who looked down at her own granddaughter on a hardwood floor and called her worthless. Bridget has not called at all. I think, even now, some part of her is still waiting for me to call her, to feel guilty, to apologize for the inconvenience of being told the truth. She'll wait a long time. I don't feel guilty. I checked, the way I check everything. There's nothing there. Maddie sees Liam every couple of weeks now. The Doyles drove 4 hours one Sunday just to take her out on the water and teach her to fish, the way her father had written down that he wanted to. She caught exactly nothing, and she talked about it for a solid week. If you have ever had to walk away from the very people who were supposed to love you, if you have ever picked up your own child and carried them out into the cold because nobody else in the room would even bend down, then I want you to know that I see you, and you were not wrong to go. Tell me, if you want to. I read every single comment. I mean that. Last week, Maddie brought a drawing home from school and handed it to me at the kitchen counter. A stick figure family, standing in a row under a big yellow sun. There's me. There's her. There's a tall man she will only ever know from a soft-cornered shoebox of photographs. And there's an uncle, off to one side, holding a fishing pole. I taped it to the front of the refrigerator, right next to the framed copy of the deed, the one with my name on it. My name, and only my name. 2 things this family always agreed were worthless. The quiet daughter who insisted on reading the fine print, and a little girl with no daddy. We are doing just fine. They spent 4 years teaching my daughter she was nothing. So I picked her up and I carried her out, and we are never going back through that door again. My silence was never surrender. It was just me, reading the whole page before I ever picked up the pen.